All right. Good evening, listeners. Welcome to Motley Crude, episode 14. I'm Kevin. This evening with me, I've got Andrew. How you doing, man?
Good.
Awesome. And we've also got Ryan with us. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing great. How are you guys?
Pretty good. Pretty good on my end. So this evening, we've got a bit of a change of pace. We're going to be doing a hobby-focused episode. So before we get to that, though, let's talk a little bit about what's new in our hobby since the last time we've spoken. So yeah, let's kick it off with Ryan. What have you done over the last week and a half, hobby-wise?
I've played like 3 games.
Nice.
Yeah. Played a game against Night Goblins where I died horribly. And I played a game on Warhol I just won't talk about. And then I played another game into the Night Goblins who I savagely murdered with horses. So it's a good time.
Awesome. That's good. It's pretty solid. Was it the same player for the 2 Night Goblin games?
Yeah.
Okay, good. So you got your revenge.
Exactly.
Awesome. That's perfect. Awesome. Andrew, what's new in your hobby, man?
Not too much. I've been chipping away at some Necromunda terrain that I built over a year ago, but just never really painted. I got a few of those projects off my desk, and I'm just working on the last one now. Also, I noticed on Xbox Game Pass they added, might have been there for a while, but Warhammer 40k Darktide.
Nice.
So I downloaded that, I guess, a week ago, and I've been playing the shit out of that. It's actually a super fun game.
Yeah, it's a pretty good game. I played it when it released. I guess what was it, like a year and no, 2022. I think it released.
I think it's 2 years now.
Yeah. I think it's a good game.
I never really followed it, but like a lot of my friends, I guess, played it back in the day, and they had said like it was kind of shitty. But I guess over the past year they've added like a bunch of new stuff, so I've been having like an awesome time with it. I can't speak for how it like actually released though.
Yeah, I think no, it was playable when it released, but I think you're right. They did put a lot of extra work into it, and it's certainly in a better state now. Awesome. And did you play any games, Andrew?
No, I haven't really had time. Like,
okay,
we're like smack dab in the NHL schedule, so basically all my weekends are just work.
Understood. Okay, yeah. On my end, it's been, as per usual, pretty busy on the hobby side. So I finally finished my Mordheim project, so that Amazon Warband is all 100% done. I also built and painted some like Wyrdstone tokens for the game, which I think came out pretty well also. So I'm super happy with that. I started painting yesterday my Wolves of the Sea finally. So I got the first model test, like the scheme tested out and painted. So I'm super happy because we'll be talking about this in this episode at length, but like I managed to get a painting scheme that I'm happy with in terms of time and quality that it takes. And I'm just extremely excited right now to be hobbying. So that's good stuff. I also played one game over the last week. I had my first game of the Old World Legends tournament online. I was playing into Beastmen. It was a very hard fought game that ended with an 11 or a 9-11 loss for me. I going into the game, like Beastman is usually a pretty good matchup for me, but the specific list with a big poison shooting block and then a -2 to hit Minotaur Doom Bull in it, so like to prevent you from going in, was just a really hard nut to crack from a like list design perspective for my army. So I'm actually really happy that I fought it, I think, up to an 11-9 loss. So yeah, really happy with that. And then I had another game planned against Bretonians, which kind of fell through. But I will make that up this week because my next opponent in the online league is a Bretonnian player, so I will be playing that game for sure. So yeah, that's about it for me. I also ever marching on in my Horus Heresy reading project. I'm down to 3 novels before the Siege of Terra, so I'm getting there. Pretty pumped for that too. So yeah, that's yeah. Go ahead.
What are you gonna do with your life once that's over?
I don't know. I'll have to listen to the plethora of other books on Black Library that I could listen to, or catch up on other podcasts, something like that. Because I listen to the books while I paint. So yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So let's move on to the episode in earnest here. So we're going to be talking about hobby related stuff this week. So basically, what we're looking to do with this episode is how to get basically a new old world army table ready, and playing games. So like, how do you pick out a new army? How do you source the models? How do you find people to play with? How do you come up with a painting scheme and stuff, like all that kind of information? So should be a pretty interesting one. Before we jump into that, those points specifically, we have a little bit of news to talk about. So last week on the episode, we talked about the Grand Cathay. That was the army that was presented or hinted at by Games Workshop during the preview. So there's been some more rumors about this army over the last week. These rumors are from a 40K focused channel, usually Chapter Master Valrak, who you may all know on YouTube. So he says that he's heard that Grand Cathay is getting about 6 or 7 kits to start off. So there's allegedly is a ranged light infantry kit, so peasant archers or crossbowmen. There's a heavy infantry kit, probably the Jade Warriors from the Total War sort of army list there, with either sword or spears. Heavy cavalry with spears, which sounds a lot like the Jade Lancers. The Longma Riders, which I talked about last week, like the not Peg Knights that Grand Cathay has access to. The Sentinel Guardian, which is the big Terracotta Giants that we also talked about. Some hot air balloons, and then the Dragon / General Shapeshifter characters. Andrew, what are your So before I go any further, this individual has a pretty good track record when it comes to rumors. I've listened to him for quite a long time. So just let's say we take these things at face value. What are your thoughts here, Andrew?
I mean, I guess if Cathay is coming, which I'm pretty sure it is, that's a pretty safe bet on what's actually coming. Just, you can go down the list of units available in Total War, which we kind of did after last week's episode. And even if the rumor is true or not, that's kind of a no-brainer guess, because chances are at least some of this shit will be released regardless. So if true, that's awesome. But at the same time, it's well, if Cathay's coming, we kind of already know what would be in that army list to begin with. So this is kind of just
sure,
a safe bet regardless. Not saying he's wrong, it's just, even if he is, it's easy to speculate because we kind of know what a Cathay army would include.
Fair. Yeah, sure, fair. I can buy that. Yeah, Ryan, what are you, any hot takes on this?
I don't have an opinion on the subject.
Sure. Sure.
Valrak, on averages over time, is usually right.
Yeah.
But quite literally, these could be coming out 3 years from now, or these could be coming out tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
They probably exist, but they're also things that if I was going to make up a rumor, not saying he did, but if I was going to make up a rumor, they're all the things that I would just be Bretonnia has peasants and knights. They're going to be in the army. There's nothing groundbreaking there.
Sure, sure.
Yeah, that was kind of my point too.
Yeah. So I guess I'm a little bit less critical than you guys. I don't think it's going to be in 3 years type release, just because after the two Arcane Journals, there's probably not like a 2.5 year gap before the next thing they put on that rumored timeline or whatever that they had during the preview. But all that being said, like, so the elements that we talked about last week as being sort of some of the key in the design of that army are present. So like those Longma Riders, the Dragon Shapeshifters, the Hot Air Balloons, the Terracotta Giants. So like that all shows up. That's cool. I don't think that, again, taking this all at face value, 6 or 7 kits there, like there is 100% more coming with this army, just because there's no way they're releasing an army with a single character model. Like there's going to be your engineers, there's going to be your regular captain type character. So there's going to be more there. But I just thought it was interesting that we're already starting to get some rumor through the good old rumor mill here of what would be in that army. So cool. Moving on. One thing we haven't done in a few weeks, Ryan, upcoming events. You want to just walk us through some of the stuff that's coming up?
Absolutely. So on February 9th, we've got an event at Out of the Box in Bell's Corner here in Greater Ottawa area. And then on February 22nd, I think it is, we have an event at SBT Comics and Games down in Kingston. On March 16th, there's another event at Nexus in Kingston. And then the next event after that is Canhammer Team Tournament at the start of May. 3rd, 4th May, is that correct, Andrew?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then CTC returns to Ottawa the weekend of 24-25 May. So our friend Danny will be running a tournament at that event as well. And that was the first 2-day tournament that we had in Ottawa for the Old World last year. So that's what we got coming up.
Yeah, and I think we're actually getting some out of towners coming in for that GT at CTC. I've got a buddy coming up from the States for that one. So yeah, I think it's going to be a good event too. I'm looking forward to CTC for sure. CHTT a little bit more there because that's super interesting, but CTC for sure also. Cool. All right, so let's move on to the main subject for this evening. Let's start talking hobby-related stuff. So, what we're gonna approach this from the perspective of, like, most of our listeners here already probably have an army for the Old World. They may be looking at getting a second one, or maybe they want to take their gray plastic and make it beautiful and to bring it to the table. Maybe you're looking for how to find a play group in your area, that kind of stuff. So we're going to start from the get-go, like the actual start of a project here. And we're going to begin by talking about how do you select an army, and then how do you figure out what you need to buy for said army when you kick off a new project. So first thing, Andrew, I'm going to ask you is, like, what are your thoughts in terms of how you select a new army or project that you're going to go for? Like, do you have any tips or guiding thoughts for our listeners? How important is stuff like competitiveness or theme to you when you're thinking about collecting an army?
Yeah. I think foremost, like how I would start is just go online or Instagram or to the GW site and just have a look at the different armies and factions that are there. And whatever sort of catches your eye, or you think, that's kind of cool, like, look into that more after you get that initial, like, gut reaction to a faction. Because realistically, at the end of the day, you're going to be spending a lot of time, building and painting these models, and then using them on the table. So realistically, it should be something that you're enthusiastic about playing. competitiveness and theme kind of comes after, I guess, but like initially it should just be something you're stoked about. So if you see that like cool chaos model and you're like, man, that's really cool. I'd really like to grab that and then maybe expand an army out from there. I think that's more important than worrying about competitiveness right off the bat. Um, Obviously, depending on you are, maybe all you do care about is competitiveness, but given the amount of like not actual playing that you're still going to be spending with this army, I think you should be focusing on what you're interested in playing first. What do you think, Kevin?
I generally agree with you almost entirely here. I think by far the most important thing is selecting an army that you are pumped about and that you're going to enjoy hobbying with. Like as you mentioned quite clearly, or Andrew, like at the end of the day, you're going to spend more time building and painting in most cases than you are going to be playing with that army. So if you don't enjoy the process of like spending time with those models and getting them like battled ready or painting them, whatever, like you're just going to find the experience miserable, and it's a lot of money spent to be miserable. So don't do that. And I'm all about theme when it comes to selecting the next project, like, or aesthetics, like sort of group those together there, aesthetics and theme. I'm at the start of a new project now with the Wolves of the Sea, and that's exactly what brought me in. Was like, I read about the theme in the the Arcane Journal, and I was super sold on the project from there, and it's just built my enthusiasm for it. And I think that's the way I would recommend approaching projects. Like, I think you should not think about the competitiveness of an army that you're looking at from the get-go, because, as a lot of you will know from your experience with GW game systems, is like the meta changes, the rules change, points often change, not so often in the old world, and they'll make an army that's good, not so good on the turn of at a moment's notice type situation. And if you just bought that army for its competitive potential, then you may like end up feeling like you don't like the project anymore, you don't want to continue, or whatever. I think the best example is what recently happened to Sisters of the Thorn. If you thought that the Pillar of Fire spam list was the greatest thing since sliced bread, and you went out and you bought a whole Wood Elf army to pursue that Pillar of Fire spam, rather than because you like Wood Elves, you're a very disappointed individual right now, and you're probably reselling or shelving that project. So yeah, I guess that would be my sort of like the broad strokes. What do you think, Ryan?
I totally agree with you guys. Like, whenever I start any project, it kind of just starts off of vibes and being like, this looks neat. And then theme. And then kind of competitiveness eventually, but that like flows from kind of bulking out my unit choices.
Mm-hmm.
Not so much like I picked Bretonia because it looked cooler to me than Tomb Kings, and then I built 97 peasants, lost every game at a GT, and then bought more horses.
Yeah.
So, like, that's how that goes.
Fair. No, that makes sense. So just moving on slightly there, I'll stay with you, Ryan. Like, this is a question that's come up ever since the game was released, but I think it's still important to discuss as like we're talking about starting a new project here. What are your thoughts on starting up right now and like almost February 2025 a legacy army specifically for the old world? Like, would you do it? Would you recommend it? Or would you pass on it?
So, I personally would do it if any of them were actually of interest to me, which they aren't presently.
Sure.
But like, I would do it. I would encourage people to do it because the PDFs are on the internet. Even if Games Workshop up and deletes them from their website tomorrow, they still have existed, and the community specifically for this game, like, is not going to just suddenly be like, oh, I guess Chaos Dwarves don't exist anymore. Like,
Yeah. Mhm.
I don't see that happening. So unless, and I apologize for those people who fall into this demographic, unless your event and other playing space is explicitly Warhammer World, it is a non-problem for
Fair.
everyone else. So that's my stance on the legacy factions. Like, if
Right.
it's cool and you love vampire cavalry, build vampire counts. They look amazing, especially with
Yeah.
all the new stuff that's coming.
Exactly.
Like, just go for it. Because at
Yeah.
the end of the day, as many games as we play, this hobby, like the like arts and crafts portion of this hobby, is the vast bulk of your time, effort, and energy. So if you love it, just do it.
Yeah. Agreed. Agreed. Andrew, what are your thoughts on this as a proud legacy army owner?
Yeah, I think, if those legacy factions again are something that you're like interested in playing, then 100% go for it. Like, just like Ryan said, even if GW takes it away, those rules still exist, and I think you'll be hard pressed to find many gaming communities that are going to be like, well, that's it, no more legacy. Like, people have a want for those armies into the game. Some of them are very classic and intrinsically tied to Warhammer Fantasy. So if that's something you like, go for it. I will add a caveat that you might have a harder if competitiveness is like the thing you're interested in, you might have a hard time getting the results you want right away, or you might have to skew your list in a certain way to keep that legacy faction competitive if that's what you're going for. But for the most part, just again go with what interests you. And this is based on just gut feeling myself, but I feel like we're going to hit a point down the road, maybe not anytime soon, maybe a couple years, but I'm pretty sure they'll probably eventually roll legacy back in some fashion.
Mm-hmm.
Even if it's just renamed, like as long as Old World sells well, they're gonna look for ways to expand, and bringing those legacy factions back into the game is just an easy thing. I'm pretty certain that'll happen at some point, as long as the game stays, strong and sells well.
Yeah, that makes sense. So, as a primarily legacy army playing guy in the old world, I'm obviously not going to tell anybody not to collect them, but I do want to like throw out a little bit of nuance here. However, I think that the longer you wait on starting a legacy army project, sort of the less value you're going to be getting out of it, simply because the game is moving on, and you're not getting the same kind of support as you are with your like sort of the mainline supported armies. So in the current construct, you're not going to get a vampire counts arcane journal, and none are planned. So you're not going to get those new ways to play the army. You may or may not stay up to speed with any rules changes or things that come out in the future. So there is that to consider, which sort of tempers my enthusiasm a little bit when it comes to starting, let's say, a new legacy army. However, like you guys, I'm not worried that they're going to suddenly be kicked out of events or no longer accepted. Like as you mentioned, Andrew, the community loves these factions. And we all own some of them, so we're gonna keep bringing them on. I'm a little bit concerned though of if there's a new addition, or there's a significant update to the rules. Like I don't know sort of where the legacy factions would end up in that kind of a situation. Presumably the community could do something about it, but I feel like that would just make your your life a little bit more complicated when you're trying to go to different events and see if they're using those community packs or not, etc. Like, so anyways, just something to think about is that early on in the game's life cycle, you're probably going to get more bang for your buck out of the legacy factions. But in general, like I would do it if you love the army, go go for it. All right, so moving on. So let's say you've selected your army. You know what you want to go for your project. Like, let's talk about how do you figure out what you should be buying. And then what do you like? Should you buy a ton of shit at first, or just zero in on a 2,000 point list and carry it from there? And then what tools have we used to sort of to help us with that on our end? So I'm going to kick this one off. So on my end, the thing that I would 100% recommend is if you're starting a significant project like this, is absolutely do some test games. Do ideally some Warhol games to just try out the army and zero in on a list before you start buying a ton of stuff. So in my personal example with the Wolves of the Sea army, one of the reasons why it took me so long between deciding that I was getting the army and then just starting to paint is I play tested a bunch of different lists that I was interested in for the army, and then I figured out exactly sort of what I wanted, and from there I got an order of what I'm going to be building and painting first. And I think people will sort of focus on the big pieces when they're doing that. So like am I doing in the Wolves of the Seas example here? Am I doing a Chaos Lord on Dragon? Am I doing a Demon Prince? Am I doing a chaos like a sorcerer lord, etc. But I think one of the most important things is figuring out what you enjoy so much that it's probably going to show up in whatever list you do end up running, and that'll just give you options for the future. So like in my playtesting, I really settled on, for instance, a core, like a 500 points of core that I really enjoy playing and I think has a lot of value. So that one is like a slam dunk in terms of, just getting it painted and table ready, because I can use that basically in whatever version of the list I run. So, yeah, just to sum that up is I would 100% try things out before you start buying and before you start like lining up what you're going to be painting and what you're going to be doing. But I do nonetheless like advise probably buying more than what you think you need, like the 2,000 points, just because again, points change, rules change, the meta changes, and you want to have a little bit of flexibility still. Does that sort of line up with what you were thinking, Ryan?
No, you're just much more deliberate. I'm a wildly impulsive person, and people should not take my advice.
Okay.
So my my army construction tends to lean more towards it'll start as a couple core units and maybe a character or something. And yes, I do all the things like test games on Warhol and making lists and whatnot. But usually the construction process starts with something from the core of the army that's going to have continuous utility no matter which way army construction goes. Same
Yeah.
idea with characters. But then after that, kind of a snowball of like, I build some armies that I liked playing, I acquire some things, and it just kind of goes in a direction until maybe I don't like a unit so much, and then I'll pivot and I'll pick up another thing so that I have an alternative option. And like the end result is the same. It's roughly a 2,000 point army with kind of a 500-ish point sideboard of swappable options.
Mhm.
But the mechanism of getting there is just a lot more chaotic.
Sure. Fair. That's it. Yeah, that makes sense. Andrew, what are your thoughts on this one?
My thoughts are, Kevin, your way is the absolute, I think, best and smartest way to do it. Personally, I've yet to start an army project in my whole life that followed that method. I usually go nuts and just kind of buy a bunch of everything and then figure it out from there. So with my Dark Elf army, I have enough stuff in various stages of being built to basically field anything in the army. It was kind of the same way I did things when I started my 40k Space Marine army. I literally bought kind of one of every unit and just figured out a list after the fact. So I do it wrong.
That's a big buy list for Space Marines.
I narrowed it down to just Primaris stuff
Okay,
and just
okay.
like Ultramarine centric things. But even then, it was like one of every sort of Primaris kit and the Ultramarines characters, and just was like, okay, I'll make a list now and then add whatever I need after. But ultimately, like half that Ultramarine stuff isn't built. I have 2 big units of stuff for Dark Elves I still haven't built. Because I've kind of honed in what I want my list to be. And I figured that out kind of just through trial and error from playing. I will add that on top of like your Warhol suggestion, just go online and see what other people are running in those factions. If you're an old hat Facebook player or person, I think pretty much every Warhammer army has their own dedicated like Facebook group.
Yeah.
So if you're interested in, let's say, Chaos Warriors, you can join the Old World Chaos Warriors group, and you can kind of see the things that other people are playing and fielding, and kind of get an idea of like, okay, like I like this guy's list. Let me maybe build towards that, or make my own variation of that kind of template list. And you can go from there too. It's a really good resource, just like all those like different Facebook groups are a really good resource if you're trying to like learn an army or figure out what to do to get into one.
Yeah, I think that's a really good advice, and we'll be for sure talking about like how you leverage social media. I think a little bit further down when we talk about like how you find players, all that kind of stuff. But like, it's absolutely, I think, of value too when you're trying to zero in on a list. Just one thing I want to clarify though, before all our listeners think I'm an extremely disciplined individual, the reality is I did buy a whole shit ton of stuff. However, before I started painting and buying, that's as painting and building, sorry, that's when I did all the testing to sort of put things in order, not as early as I should have before I purchased everything. So just I think an important clarification to make. Okay, so let's talk about sourcing models. Okay, so I know that this is probably a much easier conversation than it would have been like 2 years ago if you wanted to get your hands on these models. But so we'll start with Ryan here. Like, how do you go about finding the models that you want for your latest army or project or whatever? Like, what have your experiences, feelings been about like GW stock availability? Would you suggest eBay gouging, or other secondhand, ways of getting your miniatures, 3D prints, etc.? Like, what's your general sort of advice and your experience been?
Yeah, so like aside from the little blip right after the game launched where a ton of Bretonnian stuff was like not super easily accessible, um I've actually not had any significant issues with product availability direct from Games Workshop or through ancillary retailers, with the exception of Lady Elise Duchard, who has never returned to stock in North America. And I guess the Questing Knight Paladin on foot, but I don't even know what I would use that model for. I just want him. Anyway, so aside from those two things, being able to get the models required to play the game hasn't been a huge challenge for the supported armies. And ever since Dwarves, really, this stock issue at launch seems to have, like, there's Empire stuff at all 3 stores in the town I'm in right now. Like, no issues, could walk out of a store with a 2,000 point army tomorrow. I won't.
Is that your plan for tomorrow, Ryan? Is that what you're doing?
No. My plan for tomorrow involves significantly more markers and overhead projector sheets.
Sure.
Um, fine. So that's a good spot. But with that said, I'm also a big fan of alternative ways to represent the units in the game. Um, I haven't really gone down the eBay route for anything off the top of my head. Secondhand, I've definitely picked up a few things. There's some decent sites here in Canada, or there's some decent stores here in Ontario that do sell secondhand groupings of models. There's kind of hit and miss on like I think sometimes I was looking at like some more peasant archers, and it would have been after shipping would have been cheaper to just go to Red Dragon and buy a new box of
Exactly.
archers.
Yep.
Um, 3D prints, I've got a bunch. That's where I got my bombards for my Bretonians and my damsel on a unicorn. So like there's really excellent 3D printed proxy options out there, which are great. Another thing that kind of wasn't mentioned in the list, but that I definitely used in my Bretonians were other ranges of historical or historical fantasy models. So
Absolutely.
I have a large number of like Fireforge games, Deus Vault, Crusader era infantry that I have intermixed with my Bretonian peasants, as well as some Harry miniatures, like light cavalry that I'm using as mounted yeomen. So like there's like lots of alternatives out there, Oathmark stuff,
Yeah.
um, various things from like Fireforge games, etc. That are all
Victrix, if you're in one of
yeah,
like the human factions, yeah.
exactly. So those are all like really good options if you want to make something that maybe the aesthetic of the GW model doesn't work for you, but something else is out there. There's a lot of options, and the community for this game seems like perfectly happy as long as you show up with everything on squares. Um, so yeah, I guess what I'm saying is like aside from two models, I have not had a significant sourcing problem, and it's actually been a relatively straightforward process to build my army as long as I use a diverse range of suppliers and don't just expect my like one local game store to have everything available to me.
Sure. Yeah, sure. Um, yeah, I think you raise a really good point, Ryan, that I hadn't originally put on the list there, but absolutely looking at other product lines makes a lot of sense, and even internal to GW, like. For instance, again, I'm just going to go back to the Wolves of the Sea example the whole episode here because I'm currently working on it. But I didn't, for instance, like the old school Chaos Marauders. So I dipped into another product line that's still within GW for AOS, picking up some corn, like some Blaze of Corn guys from the AOS line to work stand in as cultists and Blood Reavers, as Marauders. So that's also an option. On my end, like I agree with you, Ryan. The GW stock situation has actually been not too bad for Old World after the initial sort of set of releases there, and somehow also pricing is pretty good when it comes to GW, like comparatively to other GW product lines. So there is that. I think going direct through GW or like your FLGS, like your local gaming store is the better option. But like going through one of those is probably where I would begin my search, frankly. So I would definitely recommend that. I've done the eBay route quite often especially with my Chaos Dwarves in the past, and yeah, I would only go to eBay if it's not like if the product isn't available from GW directly. Like the prices on eBay can be astronomical, and as Ryan pointed out, like you're hardly ever getting anything that's significantly cheaper than getting it from the store or GW. Once you factor in shipping, if your models are not in stock at GW, people know, and they sell it with a sometimes pretty massive markup. And in other cases, even if the product you want is available from GW or your local store, like people are not selling it at a significant discount because they know like there's a demand for this product. So eBay is for me is like I use it only if I can't get it through another means type situation. And then like for alternative sculpts, 3D prints and stuff, like I think there's some really awesome stuff out there that you can for sure look at. You could go on Etsy and just type in the name of the unit that you want, and you'll see like a ton of different options come up. Or you could go on all the different like 3D sort of like file websites that are out there, like 3D cults and stuff like that, or Miniverse, etc., and just like get some really cool ideas. Now, as far as 3D prints go, though, I've had a pretty like mixed bag experience. I don't own a 3D printer. If you own one and you're comfortable with it, like knock your socks off and just like go hog wild and get your army that way. But if you don't own one, like buying 3D prints from other people, I've found to be a really mixed bag. Like the quality in some cases has been good from what I've ordered, but in other cases, I've had models that have like some I think poor detail on them, and that like are actually pretty brittle, and I've had some break. And in the end, like the price of ordering stuff off of Etsy or what have you for 3D prints has never really been that much of a saving, anyways. So I guess it wouldn't be my first choice either. I haven't really cracked the code on how to discern from like a listing what is a good 3D print and what is not. And I've had like some really mixed experiences. So that one I would sort of not raise as like my first port of call, unless you know somebody that does it and does it well, or you yourself are set up to do it. What are your thoughts, Andrew?
Yeah, I agree with like all of that. You know, kind of if you're not 100% a GW purist, then going like third-party routes or 3D printing is a valid option. Especially like there's a few companies out there who specifically sort of chase that GW aesthetic in their 3D print lines. Highland Miniatures comes to mind. So even though they're not official GW, they look like they could have been something GW released, which is really cool. And basically, you know, almost every army is represented somehow in 3D printing or in some other product line, or you know, eventually GW will release most of this stuff. So if you're a Wood Elf player, just wait a little bit if you really want those, you know, GW Wood Elves. Excuse me, and you can get them. Like my next project, I'm gonna be doing Beastmen probably this year, and my plan was to do like kind of a Minotaur / like Monster Force. But I'm not really a fan of the GW Minotaur, so I picked up the STL for Avatars of Wars Minotaurs, because they have like this cool multi-part sort of Minotaur resin kit, and they just look like super crazy good. So I'll be sending those over to my printer guy. Well, I'll give you his name, Kevin, because he's really good, and he's here in Ottawa, so you don't have to worry about shipping and stuff. But that's besides the point. So I'm gonna be using those, but then with GW kits as well, because I do like the gore models and sort of like the big monsters that they sell. So it'll be like a mix and match of GW and 3D print that army.
Yeah, man, I've had the exact same thoughts when it comes to Beastmen. Like I've wanted to do that army for a while. Like I've him and hawed about it. Same thing for ogres, frankly, but like nobody likes the GW Minotaur sculpts just like from the get-go. So I was looking for some also online. I found like this really cool, I think, designer. You could look it up, Andrew, if you'd like there. Raven Twin Miniatures that I found on My Mini Factory, actually. I think he has some really, really sick sculpts for Beastmen and Ogres. But like I 100% agree with you. And if you have somebody that can hook people, that would be great. But yeah, it's good stuff. Okay, good stuff. Cool. So now that we've sourced our models, let's talk about painting and getting them table ready. So first things first is like, what are your thoughts, guys, on sort of preparing from a a hard hobbying perspective to launch into like a significant painting project, like a new army? Do you plan things out? Do you like have an order of operations that sort of helps with the process? Like, how do you see that? Start with Andrew.
Yeah, for me, like I usually do a lot of quote unquote research on like kind of how I want to paint my army. So again, Instagram is such a like an invaluable tool for that. So I'll like for my dark elves, like I trolled a lot of pictures and like other dark elf models on Instagram, just said like and kind of pick out different things that I like. So it'll be like, okay, this person, I really like this aspect of this model. Maybe it's like the skin tone or something. And it's like, well, do I want to go with the traditional like black and purple that kind of GW uses for theirs? Or do I want to do something different? So for some reason I picked that kind of aqua teal as their splash color. I forget why I did that, but I think it was something different than sort of the other armies I own for other games, and I always kind of try to not just do the same thing over again. So, I have like blue ultramarines and a big Nurgle army that used to be an 8th army, now it's for AOS, so that's all green. I try to like do something different with all my projects. So I think that's why I went with the teal. But yeah, just kind of pick your base paint scheme and make sure you're like happy with it, because again, you're going to be spending a lot of time painting essentially the same thing over and over for your whole army. There will be some changes, but like the generic scheme is probably going to be pretty uniform throughout. So just make sure you're happy with that before you get, halfway through painting 100 models and you're like, you know what? I'm kind of not happy with this. And then all of a sudden, all the steam and like sort of enthusiasm for this project dies out because you weren't happy with that base scheme. Make sure you're happy with it first. If you have to, do a couple test models, tweak it here and there, kind of get your technique down or your style down, and then go from there.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Ryan, is that also sort of how you approach it, or?
Yeah, generally, like usually what I'll do is usually by the time I acquire the models, I already have a sense of where I want to go with what all of them look like. But I'll use my Bretonians as an example. Is like I started, I just built some mounted yeomen, and the first thing I do is just practice painting horses. So like my one squad of mounted yeomen's the only unit in my army that has 5 different horse breeds
Yeah.
in it. But I was like, okay, well, what do I like horses to look like? And then I learned like I like the browns, I like some of the tawnies, black can work. I suck at like the grayish kind of horse color.
Yeah.
And Pinto is just entirely out.
A lot of work for Pinto.
It's way too much work.
Yeah.
But like I learned. And so like and same thing with kind of my overall peasant aesthetic then came out of the riders of like the browns and the armors and all those other colors. So I use something small and like rectifiable to workshop, and then I when I remember to make notes on my like formula, for lack of a better term, of how I got there, and then I will use that to broadly apply to the remainder of my army as I go forward.
That makes sense. And is kind of similar to sort of what I do. I guess I'm just gonna circle back a little bit to like the planning aspect of this. I think planning is super important when it comes to making sure that your project is like that you're actually going to make it through this thing and you're going to have a finished army at the end. And even more important, if you're on some sort of deadline for an event or you want to do something specific with the army, it's something I touched on a little bit earlier, but I absolutely think through like what do I need to paint from the army, like in what order of priority. I tend to get the stuff that's going to show up in every army list painted first. So your core units or troops or whatever as a priority. They're also just a really good way to get your scheme tested out and stuff. I make sure that this is something I didn't do as a younger hobbyist, but I absolutely do now, is do some tests of the scheme on like individual models. I know batch painting is so much more efficient, and you're gonna want to be like, okay, well, if I'm getting out the paints and I'm starting this thing, I'm gonna do 5 or 10 models at once. But like, trust me in that time spent planning is seldom wasted there. And if you test your scheme out on a single model, you're going to be able to make alterations without impacting 10 models or 5 models at once or whatever. And you're probably going to be thankful that you did that in the end. So yeah, I would super, super spend the time doing the planning for the project. Think about, order of priority for painting, think about your scheme, plan out your scheme, think about what conversions you want to do and source all the parts to make sure that everything sort of flows nicely when you actually get to hobbying, and that it's not like, okay, well now actually I don't know what I want to paint next, and you're holding up, or you're missing some parts for your conversions and it sort of holds up the project. Like, I like things to flow smoothly. I'll spend more time planning, and then after that to have them all sort of flow smoothly after that point. So yeah, I guess that's my takeaway there.
Touching on
yeah.
something Ryan said.
Yeah.
Ryan said, write down what you did. That's such a huge aspect of this too, because you might not do a whole army all at once. Like, if you're anything like me, I jump around projects all the time and then go back to like an original project, and you might think you remember every little thing you did, or like every paint color you use on that army, but if you do a lot of projects, or if there's a lot of like in between from when you start something and then finish the whole army, or even if you're just adding new units like a year down the road, like, you might not remember everything you did. And if making sure everything is cohesive is important to you, then it's in your best interest to write it down. Like, I have a little notebook that basically has every sort of paint scheme, and it's very just generic. Like, it'd be like my layer levels, so it'd be like black, I don't know, say brown, and then dark red, light red, like whatever colors I use for that. Those would be my layer levels, and then maybe any washes I use in between those layers. Just something generic like that, but it's a good guideline to get you back into a project if you put it down for a while. And it's a really good tool to have, just writing down what you were doing.
Yeah, like 100%. I didn't touch on that, but it's something I absolutely also do, Andrew. And so before, I used to have like a big sort of Excel/Word doc that I would sort of write all the recipes in. But what I've been doing lately is, for my test model, I take a picture of each step of the process. Like, let's say I start painting the skin. The base coat is, name a paint that you like there. I don't know, flat skin from Vallejo or whatever. And then I will take a picture of the model with the paint bottle beside it at every step, to sort of, in the future, if I get back to that project after some time and I can't remember what the second layer of paint that I applied to the skin was, I could just pull up the picture and be like, oh yeah, it was thinner medium and sunny skin tone together, or whatever may be, right? So that could also be another way of tackling it. So, all right, let's talk about actually how do you pick your color and basing scheme for your army. And then how do you approach that part of the process? So from my side, I think that picking a color and basing scheme that you like and then figuring out a way to make it work is like super critical in terms of A, enjoying the painting process, and B, coming out with a result at the end that sort of makes sense from a visual perspective. The way that I usually approach it is, I will find an army, find an aesthetic that I like, that kind of stuff. Then I will look at a bunch of pictures, and then I will come up with what the main color or colors that I want in the army are. So, for instance, going back to the sort of Wolves of the Sea aesthetic, like for me, I wanted the main sort of visual interest color to be yellow because I didn't want to associate the Marauders with like any of the Chaos Gods, and I haven't painted a full yellow army yet, which is I think just a fun painting challenge. And then yellow, and then sort of a skin tone, a brown, orangey, reddy type skin tone color. So that was sort of my take on it, and then I wanted to have like the classic black sort of metal dark chaos warrior type armor to go along with it. So after I figured out the main colors that I wanted in the scheme, I wanted to I had to go back and sort of think of how am I going to make this work from like a process perspective so that I don't shoot myself in the foot, because there's a few things that could go wrong with this scheme of like, for instance, the skin tone. If the skin tone and the yellow are too close together, it's not going to make sense from like a color theory perspective, and it's going to look super weird when you look at it. Then painting anything remotely close to black, close to skin or yellow can be a nightmare. So I had to think sort of the process and the steps to get it like right, so that I wouldn't want to claw my eyes out halfway through the process of painting a model here. And then, so one more thing. So like, think of all that when you're coming up with your scheme. And I would strongly suggest, if this is not something you're super comfortable with, is spending some time looking at color theory and spending some time looking at, what in the arts world are some schemes, like what is, a complementary scheme, what is, a 2 or 3 color different schemes that you can apply to make sure that your idea sort of makes sense again. So if you want to do a yellow and orange scheme, like that is really tough to pull off unless you desaturate and you add some pop colors in there somehow, because it will look very samey, right? So or it can super clash, right? If you do a purple and yellow scheme, again, you're going to need to jump through some hoops, because this is like, the colors clash so hard if they're both super saturated that it's not really going to work, right? Other things I think about is like the difficulty of painting a scheme for sure. So I would think I try to be efficient in my painting process, and it's something I'll get to in a little bit here, but I would take a tactical pause and think about painting a quartered red and yellow scheme like Ryan is doing, because that adds a lot of time and effort to the painting process, right? So I'll stop there for now. One more thing, sorry, before I do stop, is basing. Like, you want to make sure, ideally, as far as I'm concerned, that your basing complements your model, right? So what I like to do, and I think what visually generates a lot of interest when you're painting these models, is have a scheme that is for your basing that is very complementary to your main sort of model's colors. So if you're doing, again, I'm doing a yellow-ish sort of and skin colored type army for my Wolves of the Sea, it would not be a good idea for me to put them on a desert base, because they would sort of blend in together. There would be very little contrast between the base and the model. And that would just, like, without adding or removing any work, reduce the visual quality of the army, right? So for that army, going back to my example, I would strongly suggest doing sort of a colder base. And I don't mean cold in the sense of temperature. I mean in the sense of like hue of color. So something that's more bluish, probably like winter colors, or some whites, some cold greens or stuff like that, just to sort of complement my scheme. So anyways, I'll stop there. Andrew, how do you go about picking colors and basing schemes?
For me, it's a lot of the same as you, sort of like looking at color theory. Maybe I have in my head a color that I want to use to begin with. So again, for my Dark Elves, it was, okay, I have my blue Ultramarines, my green Nurgle army. So for this, I was like, okay, like Dark Elves are usually black and purple, but I don't want to do like just kind of the generic heavy metal paint scheme. So I was like, okay, like I kind of like this weird aqua color that I think I was using on a different project. I'm like, well, what would that look like on a whole dark elf army? And that's kind of where I went with it. Again, I keep going back to this, but again, social media, Instagram is such a good um tool for figuring out kind of like what you want to do. Maybe you'll see a paint scheme where you're like, oh, kind of like that, or I can do that um fairly well and kind of go from there. Like I consider myself a good painter, but a lot of the things I do are things that I've seen other people do. Like you need to adapt that into your own painting, and just finding your own spin on it. For basing, again, it's something you I think you nailed it with you don't want to do something that's going to take away from the actual model itself. Like you can make a beautiful base, but the base of your model is not the focus of the army. Like it should complement whatever your army is. For my dark elves, I did all snow bases, and I kind of only did that because that was something I've never really done before. Maybe on a few like one-off models in a skirmish game, but never like army wide. And sort of like it was kind of like a way for me to expand my skill set and learn a different way of basing. Um, so that was kind of my impetus for that. Also, dark elves are from evil Canada, so snow is a thing there. So it just made sense thematically as well to go with that. Um, but yeah, for the most part, I kind of just agree with the points you made. Ryan, what do you think?
Yeah, so I'm going to preface this with the fact that I'm aggressively red-green colorblind. So I have so many problems, I know. Um, and so there's always like a bit of nuance to how I start all these things because I'll be like, oh, that looks very cool. However, I will go insane attempting to do this, which kind of restricts where I go with my color choices. Um, as it were, how I actually wound up picking these things, much like everything, is heavily vibes based. It's a lot of like I painted one Space Marine in the Howling Griffins scheme for another project 2 years ago, and went, "This is good. I've pinned down how to do this, and it was enjoyable to do." And then I got my Bretonians, and I was like, you know what? Howling Griffin sounds like the name of some exiled Bretonian minor lord. Something he would call himself anyway. And then it just went from there and turned into a yellow and red quartered Bretonian army. Um, so it's just wherever the kind of creativity takes me in that space. Um, Unfortunately, because of my vision issues, I attempt to apply color theory best I can, but because I'm working with like
Half the color
20
wheel, yeah.
like 20% less, like it's not even so much that like I'm missing out on like chunks of the color wheel. It's that those chunks blend together, which
Sure.
then make the color wheel less helpful in certain cases. Um so yeah, I just kind of go with stuff, and there's a lot of like taking a model up to my wife and being like, "Does this work?" Um, so that's the thing. And basing, honestly, the only army I ever actually finished, or there's two armies I only ever finished basing. All my historical stuff where it was just super easy. You know what? Yes, it does clash, but the ground is like the ground in Western Europe is this color.
Sure. Yeah, sure.
And then my Eldar army where I went with kind of like a moonscape thing, but because they were all like kind of bright poppy kind of colors, the moonscape didn't detract from them in any way.
Yeah.
I haven't figured out for my Bretonians yet, so the basing went as far as I found a 12-year-old container of Games Workshop sand in my basement.
Okay.
and that went on there, but it does not have a color yet.
Okay. Yeah. So, like, I guess from a color theory perspective, like making sand yellow or red would not be good with the scheme that you have, is what I would
Oh
say.
no! More than likely, it's going to be in a goblin green area.
Sure. Yeah. Like grass will work well with your army. Exactly.
Exactly.
Um. Okay. So let's move on to just talking about like painting like in its detail. Painting armies is pretty brutal for a lot of people, and a lot of people struggle with working through the process and getting the army on the table. Like, Andrew, what are sort of your recommendations from a like paintbrush to model perspective to make the process, more enjoyable, more time efficient, and still get some pretty decent results?
That's kind of a hard question to pin down. I've been doing this 20 something years at this point. I started when I was like 11. Um, so it really depends on, I guess, your level of hobbying experience as well. Like right now, um, I use a lot of airbrushing in my work that I wouldn't necessarily suggest to a new player. Um, Wet palettes are a big thing that I use. So it really depends on your skill set. Uh, I guess where these recommendations would come from. Again, kind of just set up your space as best you can to have a good workflow. Keep your paints organized in front of you. Um, Depending on, I guess, your level of focus, either have music or something playing around you to keep you, I guess, in like a work state. Or, if you're easily distracted like me, it's probably better to just paint in silence, so you can focus on what you're doing. But efficiency wise, like, just make sure you have everything laid out, have everything on hand, know where all your paints and your tools are so you're not wasting time, I guess, like looking for things, or reaching or getting up to go like find a paint on another shelf. Like, make sure you kind of have your space set up um in a way that is conducive for you getting work done.
Mhm.
Again, I have too many, I guess, like hobby utensils and like little gimmicky things that I use all the time, but maybe isn't something that's good for a new painter. That kind of makes sense. I don't know.
Yeah.
Kevin,
Yeah.
Kevin, what do you think?
Yeah, no, that does make sense. Like, I think having a permanent setup and having your stuff on hand in like a clean working space, and having something to keep you focused is really important. Like on my side, I have a permanent hobby setup. I listen to audiobooks while I paint. Like, I have this whole, it's almost like a ritual type thing to just help me along. So I agree with you fully on that one, Andrew, but I'm going to focus a little bit more on the painting process itself. Like, I think we all learn to paint in the same way. We all learn by like the GW method of, you spray your model, you prime your model black or white or gray in some cases. Then if you want to get super cool, you give it a zenithal, which is just spraying a lighter color from the top down on it, usually with a rattle can also do it with an airbrush. And then after that, you block in all your colors individually, you wash all your colors individually, and then you highlight all your colors individually. And I started painting that way. I painted my first few armies in that method. And it will give you a good looking sort of tabletop type army. The problem with it, though, is that it is extremely lengthy and tedious to paint in that fashion. And I was getting pretty frustrated with the second step of that process once the model is primed, which is blocking in each individual color and then just And I always felt like my painting really started once I had made the orc green, or in your case, Andrew, the ultramarine blue, and getting it that color is sort of a pain in the ass. Of course you can use colored primers, but if your model has multiple colors, like doing all the blocking in and then approaching each color individually, it's super time consuming. So yeah, I tried to keep pushing my painting. So I looked at other techniques moving forward. Like my sort of second batch of armies that I did in my sort of hobby life I was trying to push my painting. So I was doing a lot of like layering and blending on armies. So like my Night Lords for the Horus Heresy are like a great example of this. I was doing like 10 different shades of blue on the armor until I got to until it was all super well blended and layered and looked great. Of course, the only problem is that I was spending like 10 hours on each fucking individual model. And, I trooped through it and I got like 5,000 points painted, and it looks great, but the time spent is astronomical on that army. So I wanted to move away from that. And so I think, if there's one thing that I want people to sort of maybe take to mind when they're leaving after having listened to this episode is, how I approach my painting now is I start by looking at the color scheme in a holistic manner and figuring out what colors I can apply that will sort of feed into all the individual elements of the model. Okay. That sounds super pie in the sky and doesn't sound like much when I say it like that, but like more concretely, if I'm painting the Wolves of the Sea model that the test model that I sent you, Ryan, for instance, yesterday. So, I have three main sets of colors on that model. I have, of course, the yellow for like the cool pop color on like the cloth and stuff. I have some browns, like for all the leather type bits and stuff, and then skin, like light skin color for the Marauders themselves. So I look at those three colors and I think, what color can go underneath it? It's called underpainting. What color I could put underneath all of that to, hit as many birds as possible with a single stone. So the way that I did that in that specific scheme and how I suggest people approach their painting is, I looked at those three colors and I said, okay, yellow can paint well over pink. I know it sounds crazy, but it can. It can paint well also over white, and it can, which there's issues with, and it can also paint well over orange. Okay. So then I looked at my other colors. Skin tone paints super well over orange, and brown just paints well over everything, frankly, because it's brown. So, I figured that if I start by making, in my case, I used an airbrush, but it could have been a rattle can, spray painting the whole model orange. And then after that, giving it essentially what is like a slap chop or whatever type dry brush with a highlight color that feeds into, again, those three different colors. So I ended up going with a sort of ivory or light bone color on top of the orange, because that will feed super well into applying a skin color after. Yellow will go very well over a white highlight or a adjacent to white, like bone colored highlight. And then, as I mentioned, brown like just goes well over everything, but like it will take very well to an ivory underneath it, right? So I spray painted the model orange. I dry brushed it after like quite heavily. You can be super sloppy with this, in an ivory color. And then applying all my colors, the main colors to the model, literally took like a few minutes. Okay. I went with, you could go traditional acrylic paints and thin them down and just slather them on if you want to sort of get it base coated. But I used contrast paints that I thin out just to filter all the work that I'd done on sort of that orange and that ivory highlight in the beginning, so that essentially I can make the model the right colors to start off with in like a very, very rapid amount of time for what I think is a very good result. Like I painted my Amazons that you guys saw for Mordheim also in that manner, and it makes the painting actually super quick. So I've gone from using this method, I've gone from, about 10 hours per model in my Night Lords army of like just crazy layering and wet blending, to being able to do, the test model for the new scheme in roughly 2 hours. But that's spending a shit ton of time thinking about, what types of colors I want to use, like for small bits and bobs, because it is a test model. So I guess that was extremely long-winded, but what I'm trying to say is, think about how your painting sort of process in general is happening and go back to the basics and figure out a way where you can take some steps at the start of the process to make the end result easier and more time efficient to achieve. Right. So, yeah, I don't know. Does that sort of resonate with you, Ryan?
Yeah, that is all very interesting take on all of it. So I'm one of the people for which painting is just a brutal activity unless I am in the very particular mood where the dopamine will come from the painting. Um, so I don't really have advice for other people. My ability to get things painted hinges on event deadlines and like kind of like strange external factors more than it has anything to do with process or the situation in which I hobby. Like I have a lovely permanent hobby space that does not in any way entice me to actually paint more. Sitting at a desk in another town in my temporary room with all of the painted models I could move. And I've painted once in like 2 weeks. So
Yeah.
it's but when the mood strikes, it's like the only thing I can focus on, and I'll paint 3 units of cavalry in an afternoon. So
Yeah.
it's not really a transferable
Yeah. Piece of
solution.
advice. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, but
I guess like I'm coming from a place where I actually really enjoy painting, and it's like my favorite part of the hobby for sure, right? So yeah,
well, this is my problem is I do enjoy painting. The missing piece in my brain is the like ability to just go start doing a thing, even if it's a thing I like.
yeah,
Um, so it's just one of those things. But
yeah.
um, but
I
with that
super
said, like
hate painting.
Was that
yeah,
Andrew? Sorry.
I super hate painting. Like I find it a tedious exercise all the time. But I come from an era where it was like your shit better be painted or you can't play with us type thing.
Yeah,
So like that's always been ingrained in me. So that's been like my driving force to paint. But like I find the whole process tedious. But I still push myself because I want to have my models at least look decent. But
yeah,
yeah, I have a hard
exactly.
time getting started, or I always have a good way to find something more important to do than paint until, like Ryan said, there's some sort of deadline. Or I guess maybe that's why I also jump around projects so much, is because it's like, well, at least if I'm not doing the same thing over and over again, um, I can at least keep some interest because I'm doing something different every time. But yeah, I have a hard time staying focused on painting.
But as it were, I guess what I was getting at is the only trick I have is I just keep everything organized and tidy so that when I am ready to paint, it's all there. Like I I can just go and it's not an extra chore to get ready to do the thing.
yeah, and like I get that. So I guess I'm coming from a different place here, but for me, I think a big part of the process was making it like making painting a habit, right? So it's a like I enjoy painting, and it's part of like a way that I wind down, and I sort of I guess it's kind of a coping mechanism for life for me to paint actually. And the way that I got to that point, I think, was making it a habit, right? So after the day's done, the kids are in bed, like everything's sort of taken care of, is sitting down for an hour or two and just having that sort of me time, listen to an audiobook and just push paint around on models has been like super beneficial in my life. And yeah, if you can find a way to just make it sort of a habit, even if it's like you just do 20 minutes a day, right? Like before you get ready for bed or whatever your works for you, there is you go and you apply a wash on some colors or whatever. I think that will make it less tedious when you sort of just subconsciously buy into the process maybe. Yeah, I guess that there's that. And then, as you said, Ryan,
Cool
like
story.
I
It's
think,
not how ADHD works.
yeah, fair. I guess I'm yeah, that's not something I sort of deal with, but um, and then like as you mentioned though, Ryan, like having the painting set up, good to go, and where you could just sit down, pick up a brush, like put some paint on your palette, and then start going, like is super key, because if it takes you 20 minutes to get set up, you're like the chances of you actually doing it like decrease significantly, I think.
And to build on that too, though, like obviously we understand like not everyone lives in a situation where you can have a permanent painting setup, but like even if you have a shoebox with a cup for water, some paper towel, your palette, whatever, the paints you are using for the project at hand, some brushes and whatnot that you can pull out and put on your kitchen table and start painting, that's better than just having like a tub under your bed that you have to dig through and create a painting space.
Yeah.
Um, so just, having that little bit of task organization so that when you are able to do the thing, you can just start doing it without intermediary steps.
Yeah, 100%. And I think like there's some ways to do that is, yeah, you could have like the shoebox ready. I've also bought for like when I'm on the road, just to have like my mobile painting station is, and something you can look at home. I think it's Monument Hobbies makes this like, it's basically a big carrier case that is like a mobile like painting station, right? That you could totally have at home if you don't have the space to just have a permanent setup. And in there you have all your slots to put your paints in. You have some little holes, like it's a big foam thing inside, like a big hard carrying case with straps and stuff. Like you pull out your palette from in there. Your paintbrushes are in there. There's places to store the models you're working on, and so you could have your whole hobby contained in that bag, and just like pop it on the table. Everything's organized, and you're like, even though you don't have a dedicated space, you're like 5 minutes away from, or 2 minutes away from being able to paint, right? And I'm not sponsored. I'm not sponsored by Monument Hobbies to say that. So, yeah, Andrew, I think you tried to jump in there for a bit.
No, that was kind of
Okay.
everything.
Okay, cool. All right. So, moving on a little bit, like, do you guys have any thoughts on, because it's a reality in the old world, movement trays, and sort of hobbying them up or basing them? Like, do you recommend it? What are some sort of ideas that you've looked at for movement trays, Ryan?
So I just straight up bought a whole bunch of 3D printed movement trays when the game came out. That my army goes on. They're currently black. Once I actually have a basing scheme for my army, I do intend to match them. But I haven't gotten there yet.
Fair. Andrew, any thoughts on movement trays?
Really, it's up to you. When I played 8th edition, I had, I don't know, a stupid amount of armies. So I always kept my movement trays very generic. They were just the GW, like the snap kits where you just kind of customize the ones you want. And I just had them painted like a generic brown that matched like the edges on all my army's bases, even though the tops might have been different.
Yeah.
That was more like just so I can use the same movement trays for a bunch of different armies. For my dark elves, I went with laser cut MDF for the bases, and they had like a good size like lip where I was able to sort of extend the basing from the models onto it. And because my models' bases are also MDF, when you have them all ranked up, it's like flush with the edge of the movement tray, so it kind of just looks like one big square. So this was the first time that I've ever like actually done any sort of basing on the movement tray, and it was just because it looked really good and it ties like the whole thing together.
Yeah.
But realistically, it's kind of dealer's choice on that. Like some people don't like their movement trays to be hobbied up. Some people do. It's kind of just if that's something you want to do, then why not? It's another cool like little hobby project you can do to make your army pop, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think you're right there, Andrew, at the end where you're saying, it really ties the army together. That's, I think, is my take on it is, whether you do the GW sort of snap fit movement trays that I don't actually hate, I think they're pretty decent, or MDF, or what have you, a magnetic sheet of metal, or I don't know, whatever you're doing. I think basing that or hobbying up that movement tray to fit the bases of the models really adds your like a lot of character to the army, and like it just ties everything together in its cells. Like I think it's, if you want to have as good an army, as good looking an army as you can, and your army is beautifully painted up, and you've spent some time basing them and it looks great, and then you slap them on like gray movement trays, like gray plastic movement trays, or even worse, like because it's super bright, MDF laser cut movement trays. Like it's just going to take away from that visual, you know, the wholesome picture of that, of the sort of the visuals of the army. So I would for sure recommend doing the hobby work on the movement trays. It's pretty quick at the end too. Now I understand the reality that you're talking about, Andrew, in terms of if I have 8 different armies that are based separately, I want to use the same movement trays for all 8. Like I get that also. I think it would still be better then to, as you did previously, Andrew, is like have a sort of neutral scheme on your movement trays than just using like gray plastic. But I'm not even sure that like your 8 armies would be using the same setup of movement trays anyway. Like not everything you're using is going to be 2x5 25 millimeter across your 8 armies, or what have you. So you may still end up needing to do a bunch of movement trays regardless. But yeah, I guess my point here is spend the time and do it. Like it'll just bring everything together.
On that note, I do like the quote unquote invisible movement trays where it's a sheet of
With no
either
lip.
like
Yeah.
with no lip, yeah. So it's like magnetic and your bases like completely hide the actual movement tray, but they all stay like cohesive. Like
Yeah.
I think those are cool as well, but it's a little bit more tricky to make it like perfect, whereas movement trays can be a little bit more forgiving because there's give inside the sort of space.
Yeah. Yeah, I haven't actually used invisible movement trays, so I'm not like super well placed to talk about them. I guess you would still sort of have the same problem though. If you had a big unit and models started dying, and then you had a sheet of metal show up when you remove models, it could also be pretty jarring, right?
Sure, but at that point you just paint the sheet like a
Yeah,
generic color
fair,
and
fair.
have it like everything sitting on top.
Yeah. Yeah, sure. Awesome. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, so let's move on to tools of the trade. So what are some of the specific tools that you recommend that people get their hands on? Are there any hobby essentials you wouldn't attempt a project like this without? Yeah, what are you thinking, Andrew?
So I kind of touched on this before just because I have been doing this a long time. So like nowadays, I wouldn't start a project without some sort of airbrushing just to either get like a base color down or blocking in like large flat areas on models. Um, I don't think that's an essential though. Like you can get away with rattle cans, um, and just using that for sort of like base coating or doing like zenithal highlights and things like that. Um, Realistically, again, this question is more based on your level of hobbying. So if you're a new painter, like my suggestion would be, get 1 or 2 rattle cans, like either a black or a very dark color, and then like an ivory and do zenithals just with a spray can
Mhm.
and contrast paints or whatever version X company makes. Like I'm a Vallejo stan, so I have their express color range. And I would suggest just use that. It's a good way to get a lot done, and still have it look very good, but in a very short amount of time. Just, do your 2 sprays and then start your blocking and colors with those express paints. And basically your army's done with not a lot of work and it still looks very good on the table. Because I've been doing this a long time though, um, there are things I use a lot. So I paint by layering. I've done it forever. I thought that's what everyone did. But so I'll start with like a brown base coat usually on a lot of things and then build my colors up. So I'll go like dark red, slightly lighter red, lighter even, and then like highlight colors. And then I might wash everything back and then do more highlights. So for me, like a wet palette's very important for that. Having multiple like brushes that I can use for wet blending or things like that, or something I always have on hand. Um, Different sizes of brushes is also very important. So, have like your fine detail and then sort of like your bigger ones. And then I use dollar store makeup brushes for dry brushing. They're like perfect for it. So I use a lot of those tools as well. Um, but again, I guess it's just how crazy you want your hobby project to be. And I don't think other than just a few brushes and paints, there's anything that's super essential. Everything is kind of just what makes the job easier for you or tools that you might be comfortable using. And again, that's more of a skill set dependent question, I feel.
Yeah,
What
absolutely.
do you
Like, yeah.
what do you think, Kevin?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're right. It is like it depends on your level of comfort, but I think if there's 5 or 6 things that I for sure would like I need in my sort of toolbox to for any project I tackle, like I will leave airbrush aside because as you mentioned, Andrew, like that can be a big spend item and it's a whole new skill set to learn. Like I use it for in every project basically, but like I'll park that one for now there because what your house is like, what your financial situation is like, all that kind of stuff factors in. But regardless of all that, um, a wet palette is absolutely critical. I don't know why I cannot fathom why GW doesn't sell one or market these things because probably because they want you to burn through more paint as quickly as possible, frankly. But like, it's an absolutely critical tool that will like entirely reshape how you paint. Like not struggling and putting a small amount of paint on your dry palette and then powering through as quickly as possible before it dries out like is just such a game changer. Being able to have your paint in open air for like hours and hours and have it not change is fucking mind-boggling when you first discover it. So like I would absolutely recommend you get one. And then if you for some reason are like on a super tight budget and you don't want to buy one from Redgrass or whatever other source of wet palettes you have out there, you can make one at home, which I did for a long time with like like a hard Ziploc container, a piece of fucking tissue paper or Scott towel or whatever you call it in your country, and then just some like baking paper on top. And then you can make a wet palette for zero amount of dollars that will entirely reshape how you paint at home. So like that's the first one. Something that we never think about is like brush soap, but like being able to take care of your brushes after you're done painting so that you're not burning through brushes every second week is like a big money saver and just will make your life much less miserable than trying to paint with like a frayed brush. This one's a given, but I wrote it down while you were talking, Andrew. Like, get a good hobby knife to scrape all your mold lines off of the models and make it less painful. When I started, I was cutting the mold lines out of the models and stuff. Like, just learn, like, get a good hobby knife and scrape them out. Like, that's just for me is super important. To build on what you were talking about for dry brushing, Andrew, absolutely get makeup brushes to just do some dry brushing. And then secondly, I would also like sponges. Sponges are essentially free, like packing sponges, and you can do so much work with them. Like you can, if you are on a tight timeline, you can spray your model a color that makes sense. Like let's say you were painting something red, you could spray paint your model with a rattle can, like a dark reddish hued brown, and then just take a sponge with 2 or 3 different colors of like increasingly bright red and just quickly sponge the whole model with a small sponge, and you would get a result that looks really good in like essentially minutes, right? So like I think they're a super important tool to use or just to have available. The ones that come in like clam packs and stuff are like super good for that kind of stuff. And then the last thing I'll talk about is like matte varnish. Like this is something that I didn't start using until super late in my hobby journey, as it were. But having like a bottle of matte varnish, so that before you paint your metallics, ideally, but like when your paint job is mostly done, you just quickly put a coat of varnish on your model, so that you just put a little bit of water in there, and then you just slather it all over the model. It just like disappears. You don't see it after, but it makes it so that you're not going to be pulling paint off when you're playing. You're not going to be your paint job's not going to get all messy and dirty when people like start picking up your models, look at them and stuff. And that when you look at your models in 5 years, they're not all full of chips, and they all still look pretty much as they did when you stopped painting them. So I'll stop there, but those are just some tools that I think people should definitely be looking at. Any tools you want to rep, Ryan?
No, I'm the most obscenely basic painter in existence. I own 4 paintbrushes, 1 makeup brush, uh, a cup I got at Hershey Park once that I use to clean my paintbrushes in, and some paper towel. So, yeah.
Okay, old school. I like it. But like that's how I would like if we were having this discussion 10 years ago, I would have said the exact same thing as you. So
Yeah, I'm just at the point where like it works, and I'm not so interested in painting that I care to do anything particularly fancy. So like I'm just here for the models are painted and they don't look like my 10-year-old painted them. So
fair. Fair enough. Fair enough. That's good. That works. Okay, so let's move on.
There's one.
Yeah, go ahead,
There's
Andrew.
one tool that I find as a luxury, but like I cannot paint without anymore. Is I don't know what they're called, like the holders for your models. So the
Oh, the
GW
handles.
ones,
Yeah. Yeah,
the
yeah.
handles. As I'm older and maybe less dexterous than it used to be when I was younger, having your model on some sort of holder or stand while you're painting, as opposed to just kind of like trying to grip the base.
Yeah.
I can't paint without them now. I was lucky and I bought out a bunch of the old GW ones, the ones that look like big butt plugs.
Yeah.
Before they switched to that new version. So they stand really well on the table. And they got like a big, huge handle that you can just grab on. I can't paint without those really anymore. And I was lucky to get about 10 of them. So I can do like whole squads at once and stuff.
Nice. Yeah. So
correction.
go ahead,
I was
Ryan.
gonna say I will revise my statement. Good lighting. That is the thing. I can't paint in dim light anymore. I can't paint like
Yeah,
I
same.
I brought my ring light magnifier with me to where I am, and because I could just clip it to my desk, just
Yeah.
so that I could have enough light to paint.
Yeah, that's we didn't talk about lighting, but that's critical. Like I don't know how anybody could paint effectively in the in a dark space, in a convention hall or whatever. Like that's absolutely, I think, yeah, it's critical. And I 110% recommend there be a hobby light on your desk next to where you're painting. I think probably something similar to what you have, Ryan, with like the ring light. Mine doesn't clip to the desk, but it's basically the same thing. And then Andrew, what you were talking about with the handles, that's another good one. If you don't have these like nifty handles, you can use. I've used before empty pill bottles where you'd sort of blue tack your model on top of. You could do that. I've used the corks from wine bottles also to just stick models on and use as handles. So like there's some cheap options if you don't want to buy the branded plastic handle there.
I think the light thing is because we're getting old though. I remember like in my 20s painting in like dimly lit rooms or like with just like my nightstand light next to my desk.
So okay,
And like the glow of a
paint.
computer monitor, but
Yeah.
like nowadays, yeah, I need like the brightest room I can find. Like I have my painting room is just like a little like utility room in my basement, but I've replaced all the lights with like super high lumens lights, and then I have 2 big desk lights that are like spotlights on my desk that are super bright. Like I
Sure.
can't paint without it now, but I think that's like an age thing as
Well,
well.
okay, so let me revise that then. I could paint a model in a very shitty lighting condition. I would just like it just wouldn't look great, right? Like the thing is, if you want to get a good paint job done and you actually care about the result, if you cannot see what you're doing very well, like there's some fucking fine detail and there's like you have to be able to see what the fuck you're doing, right?
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, regardless of what age you're at. Okay, anyways. So, but maybe we are just getting old. We are actually just getting old. Okay, let's move on from that depressing thought and talk about finding people to play with, right? So you got your army, you fucking somehow got it all painted up and hobbied before you actually got a game in, which is probably mind-boggling to some people. But let's say you've done all that. How do you find the old world players in your area? So, we get that not everybody has an active play group that they sort of game with that is super into the old world. And then, so what are some thoughts on this? So I think I'll kick this one off. I think there's 2 main ways that you sort of suss out who the old world players around you are and get that sort of group going. I think the first one is through social media in its various shapes and forms and sizes. So, you guys mentioned earlier, I think it was Andrew, hobby Facebook groups are like a super good way to sort of find people around you. Like most geographic areas do have hobby groups, like old world groups or whatever that you could tap into. The most effective one I've found is most of your local gaming stores will have a Discord that they use to sort of gather their community together. That is a fantastic place if you somehow haven't thought of this yet to ask or look around and be like, hey, is anybody interested in old world, and playing the old world or whatever? That is like a good one. You can look on, there's a plethora of social media sites out there that you could use. But for sure, I would use that as like your primary way of finding people. And then the second one is events. Like whether they're like tournaments, whether they're leagues or whatever. That's how the 3 of us met. I think Andrew and Ryan knew each other previously there, but like in the context of this podcast, we met essentially through old world events. Like Ryan and I, our local gaming store started an escalation campaign league or what have you there for the old world, and we played a game together, and then we just hit it off from that point. So whether you're participating in one of those, and you can find those on those discords or whatever, or whether you just look up on BCP, you search for old world events close to you, and then you just go to one and meet people, and then you sort of develop a group from there. I think those are like the 2 methods that I would recommend. But maybe I've forgotten something, Andrew.
No, I think you've covered the main 2. The reality is like we're lucky that we live in a major city. There's a lot of different gaming groups. And sort of the demographics of the city we live in, I think, are conducive to wargaming in general. So just due to the size and like the people we have who live in this city, I think helps with us being able to find a group. We're a government town. There's a bunch of colleges and stuff like that. Those are kind of like, more affluent people. I guess that's not the best way to describe it, but like people with disposable income. You'll find more wargaming groups that in places like that. So I think we're lucky in that regards. But not to say that in other places those groups don't exist. And again, just go to your online areas, check your local hobby stores, see if they know like groups or even have their own personal leagues. Sometimes you just gotta kind of make your own group though. Like, if you have a really close friend who, you do stuff, you do gaming things with, you like maybe it's up to you to pick up a couple small 500 point armies and try to get other people involved and hold demos and things like that. Like, after 8th Ed died, I went on like a big journey through all the different skirmish games that are out there, and I have a really close friend who never really bought those games themselves, but I'd always buy like two factions for that game, and we'd play together, and sort of it grew from there. The big one would have been like the Batman miniatures game, was big for a while, and it was kind of just through, some me and a couple of friends. I picked up a couple of factions, and we'd get together every few weekends, and have some drinks and play some dice, and then other people started getting into the game as well, and kind of grew from there. So like sometimes you just need to make your own group, and hopefully you have like a good close circle of friends who, even if they're not going to buy in, or at least open to playing that game with you if you provide like the models and stuff like that.
Yeah, that you raise a good point. Like we are fortunate here in this city specifically, and Old World even more specifically, with having like a lot of individuals who are interested. It wasn't like that in the past for me. Some places where I've lived before, it was hard to get a sort of a gaming group going and find people. And maybe it ends like the situation ends up that you have a friend or two friends, or like in my case, I used to play with my brothers a lot because there was quite a small community where I used to live. So yeah, maybe that's what you have to go for depending on the situation. But this hobby is no different than anything else. And if you live 5 hours away from the nearest city, like I can totally understand that it's going to be difficult for you to find people to play with. But Ryan, what are your thoughts on this one?
No, it's exactly the same as you guys. Is visit the physical spaces people could play these games in. Talk to the people working those shops. Find out maybe people come in semi regularly. Show up at those times. Try to meet those people. Like, I'm not saying build an army and just like go to a tournament blind, although that is hilarious and is an experience everyone should have.
Yeah.
But show up on a day when there's an Old World event, meet 10, 12 people, and find out how they organize themselves.
Yeah.
And carry on from there. And again, the obvious, like, here in Ottawa, we have a Facebook group, we have a Discord, we have like 3 Discords.
Yes.
Like, and then like, even across Canada, like there's a Ontario Facebook group, there's a Canada Facebook group, there's a general Warhammer Facebook group. Like,
Yeah.
across all of those, you'll start to find something. But you're right, like, and like right now I'm in Kingston. There's a decentish community around here. Like, there's some people, but it is 10 times smaller than Ottawa, and therefore,
Has a tenth of
proportionally,
the
there's
players.
just
Yeah.
fewer people playing the game.
Yeah.
And you're also always going to have like kind of siloed groups as well in any community. So like even if there's 50 people playing in an area, that may actually be like 10 groups of 5, not actually one group of 50, and you'll have to navigate the intricacies of that. But
And Ryan, I think that's actually how 90% of this hobby is organized. It's like a small group of people that just have always played together and that don't necessarily bridge into other groups. Like, I think that is an extremely common thing.
well, like, quite literally, from where I'm physically sitting right now, within I'll call it a 700 meter, no, maybe a 1,000, like a 1 kilometer circle of where I am sitting right now. There are 6 different gaming groups for Warhammer 40K that do not interact with each other.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. This is it's super common. But like you also raised a super good point, Ryan, with regards to local gaming stores. I think they're like a really good resource here because there's an incentive for your gaming store to support and prop up the community, because if people like if the community is supported, people are more engaged with the hobby. If they're more engaged, they buy more stuff. So like
Exactly.
so like the FLGS, the local store is incentivized to support it. So I think I would ask, like, when you go in and buy models or paint or whatever, just be like, hey, do you have a regular gaming night? Hey, do you run events? Hey, do you have a Discord? Because like 9 times out of 10, they sure will, because there are very few shops that just sell models and have zero other engagement with the community.
Games
Okay.
are
Yeah. Okay.
Ryan
Moving
gets the
on.
reference.
Yeah. Moving on. So Andrew, you really already touched on this, but we'll cover it a little bit more there. So in cases where there's no one around you like that plays, there's no like community that's built. Like, what are your thoughts on getting like a community engaged or creating a play group or whatever, and then supporting it around you? I'll start with Ryan on this one.
So having gone on the same adventure Andrew did, where I was the independent or alternative games person for quite some time, um, really I find the best way, like if you're the only person that's interested in a game, old world or otherwise, um, it's and you want to play it, it's worth investing in two smallish forces or a variety of smallish forces, depending on the type of games. I used to do a lot of space fleet combat games, so those were kind of easy to have a bunch of different things. But have a couple smallish options so that you do get in with the gaming community in general, and you still have your hobby project to work on. And then you just give people the option. Hey, would you like to play a game of Old World? You don't need to do anything. I can provide, and that's how you do that a few times with people until you find, eventually you will find some that maybe it scratches the right itch for them, and then slowly over time, eventually you get other people. I think at one point in time I had like 14 people in Fredericton, New Brunswick playing a game called Firestorm Armada. Like, completely random out of nowhere. But it took 2 years of me just like
Hawking it. Yeah.
shanghaiing people in the local store into trying it and then being like, oh man, this is really cool. Um, for something they'd never heard of before and that you couldn't even buy retail in Canada by that point in time. So
Yeah.
it was, it's very doable. But the thing is like not all people are organizers or leaders and are not necessarily comfortable being that person. And that's also okay. But you may have to resign yourself to the fact that like you're investing in a game that you may principally play, through Warhol and by traveling to events.
Yeah.
So it really depends on what kind of entity you are comfortable with being in your local community as well.
Fair. Yeah. Any thoughts on this one, Andrew? I'll touch on some of those points after Ryan. Yeah.
Yeah, like I agree. Sometimes you need to be like the arbiter of getting people into the game. Um, and again, I think this is very, where you live dependent. But yeah, sometimes like you need to be that force that gets people into the game, and it might be, a bigger monetary investment if you are like having to buy two armies and sort of run demo days at like your game store or with your friends to try to get them in the game, setting up your own um, social media and stuff. So make like a gaming group for Old World in your town or city, and just trying, even if there's not a lot of engagement at first, like just be persistent with it, and eventually you will find, hopefully at least, like-minded people or people who are interested in the game, and then you can be the person who gives them those initial games, because you have two forces. If you have a really receptive local game store too, you can be like, hey, listen, this Saturday this month I was hoping to run a demo day for the game. I'll bring my two little factions. Can I do that? And most game stores will be like, hell yeah, because you're going to sell models for me.
Exactly.
And even see, like, even if they don't have a Discord, see if you can just put up like a poster for promoting like your gaming group or your, Facebook group for Old World, and just make sure it the big thing is be engaged with the people who might join. People want to feel part of a community, so even if it's just like someone posting a picture on your group of like something they painted, engage with that picture, because it's gonna positively enforce them to stay engaged with the community and make them feel part of it, and then you're gonna see more people kind of flock to that, because I think generally like-minded nerds and stuff like to discuss and share things that they're passionate about. So that helps build a community, helps a community grow. But don't give up is, I guess, like my takeaway is like it like Ryan said, for him it took 2 years to get Firestorm Armada going. Like, you might have to be doing this for a while, just in a vacuum, being the Old World guy in your town, but eventually you probably will start to get people at least interested in playing, and that's when you can bust out your second arm and be like, hey, let's do some demos, let's do some things, and grow that community. Again, we live in a big city now, so we're lucky. The group grew pretty fast, and there was a lot of people from previous editions of the game who flocked to this because it's the new edition, right? So like, there's a lot of old players. Danny, who we mention a lot in our podcast, he was big on Sixth Ed and ran Sixth Ed events like since forever. I think he's still doing some, but he's a big part of the Old World community now too. So like, even bringing back some of those like old hat players from previous editions is pretty cool too. Yeah, I don't know. What do you think, Kevin?
Yeah, I agree with you. I think I think we're super fortunate here locally, in that not only do we have a lot of players, but our play group has a lot of event organizers and like community sort of rallying points that really have made things extremely easy, I think, for Old World players in the area. Like, just off the top of my head, I think we have in our playing group like 6 event organizers. The two of you guys. I know, Ryan, you've mostly been supporting the other organizers, but like the two of you guys, Danny, Darko's organizing some events. David is also on the Quebec side. So is Frank. Like, so there's quite a few. We've been really fortunate on that front. But if you don't have that on your side, and I know most people probably don't, we're extremely fortunate. Like, at the end of the day, I think the most important thing here is, enthusiasm is contagious, and passion is contagious. So like, if you're repping the game and you're able to sell it, and you're super pumped about Old World, like, other people will gravitate towards that for sure. And as Andrew said, like, your local gaming store is, like, I think, an absolute ally when it comes to this kind of stuff, because for sure, like, like the vast majority of gaming stores have tables where people could play. Like, it just makes business sense. So and most of the time they have a schedule for like when people play games. Like, on Tuesday nights it's Magic, on Wednesday nights it's 40K, on Thursday nights whatever. So you can absolutely leverage that, and at the end of the day, like, they will make it work for you. If you go to them and you're like, I'm interested in pushing this game, which you hopefully sell, and then like at that point, they start to advertise it for you, and eventually you'll get somebody. And thankfully, on our side here is the old world is a pretty popular setting. Like, it's not that hard of a sell. It's also a GW game, and if you're going to find wargamers in your area, chances are they're going to be involved in some sort of GW game system. First and foremost, like, you're more likely to find a 40K group if you don't have any old worlders around you than you are to find a, I don't know, Kings of War group. So you can absolutely leverage those guys, because they will already know the product line. They will already sort of know what Old World's about, and they'll already have looked at it, I'm convinced. So that is a bit of an easier sell on your end if you're trying to do to bring the Old World up in your community, rather than, I don't know, I forget what your space game was called there, Ryan. Pardon me. So, anyways, yeah, that those are my thoughts on it. So all right, let's. I think we're gonna wrap this up now. So let's start off with some let's finish off with some shout outs, if there are any. Ryan, you have anything you want to shout out before we close this one out?
No, just a reminder to find 3 of your best old world friends and get signed up for a Canhammer Team tournament before it sells out.
Yeah, that is a very, very good one. So I'll steal Andrew's thunder here a little bit. We only have 2 spots left for teams at CHTT. So I think that is going to be an absolutely stellar event that I strongly, push for you guys to consider coming up to. And then if you want to come to the event, but you don't have a team, or like there's some sort of blockage, like, maybe reach out to us. Like, I know off the top of my head, 2 individuals who are interested in coming, but don't have a team currently. So perhaps we can also facilitate some stuff if that's what it takes. If you've got 3 committed players and you're looking for a 4th person, maybe we can help you out with that. So yeah, I'm also going to shout out CHTT. Anything on your end, Andrew?
No, you guys fucking talked up my event, so I guess check out Danny's event.
CTC,
at the CTC. I forget the dates for that. Ryan said them at the beginning of the episode.
It's 2 weeks after CHTT.
Oh, jeez, just riding our coattails. So yeah, check that one out. Danny's an amazing event organizer. I'm sure it's going to be an awesome event. And maybe I'll actually go if I'm not working.
Yeah, I'm pretty pumped for CTC too. I attended last year. It was a great event. I'm hopefully going to go also this year. So if you are not interested in teams, I don't know why you wouldn't be, but if you're not, if you can't make the CHTT weekend or whatever, or if you want to do both events, like 100% sign up for CTC. I know the tickets are on sale now. One of my buddies, Brian, has already got his ticket for it. So that's it for me.
End of the day, the missions between both events will be shockingly similar because I wrote both of them.
There you go. What about the community? No, okay, let's not talk about community facts. All right, cool. All right, let's close this one out. Thank you, listeners, for being with us on this hobby-related journey this evening. I hope you enjoyed the episode. Leave us any comments that you or any thoughts that you have on this one, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.